Welcome, everybody. Josh Hudson here with Club Fantasy's No Punt Intended, and we're back for the latest episode. It is the second episode of our A Look Inside series. We've brought Hutchinson Brown, the young fantasy mind, back to host in place of Joe, and this week's special guest, the Fantasy Footballers lead writer, Matthew Betz at the Fantasy PT. Stay tuned, guys.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. Guess who's back? It's me, Hutchinson Brown, again. I'm replacing in for Joe Zolo, who unfortunately
replacing. That's exactly what you're doing. Bye, Joe. You're gone.
All right. Last week, guys, I was host, and we talked with Howard Bender. We talked about the Jets, the Texans, and the Jaguars. We're continuing our Look Inside series, and this week, guys, we got a very, very special guest. We've got Matthew Betz at the Fantasy PT, injury expert and DFS analyst with the Fantasy Footballers. I'm a huge Fantasy Footballer fan, so I'm a little nervous right now. How you doing, Matthew?
Oh my gosh. That intro, fellas, the last time I was on the show, that intro did not exist. I am officially hyped for this podcast. Whoever put that together, that thing is freaking sweet. But I'm doing great, guys. I'm really excited to be with you. Obviously, Ryan, you and I know each other really well from writing on the team for a while. Josh, been able to be with you on the podcast before. Hutch, it's good to meet you, man. I'm just excited, man. You guys are good people, and it's officially fantasy season. Once you get to June 1st, it's go time. So I'm really excited to be with you guys tonight. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man. All right. So today, guys, we are talking Falcons, we're talking Bengals, and we're talking Eagles. All right. So let's kick it off. Let's start with the Falcons. Last year's record, they're 4-12. They were 4-12 last year. They have a new coach in Arthur Smith. And I'm going to quickly read through these upside, downside, trust fall, rookie to watch, and then Joe's couple of last players that he threw in. So upside, players that have an upside to finish much higher than where they're drafted. Ryan put in Mike Davis. Josh put in Russell Gage. The downside players, guys that can finish much, much lower than where they're actually being drafted right now. Ryan put in Kyle Pitts. Josh put in Mike Davis. Trust fall, this is the guy that if you have to pick one player from this team, who are you going to trust? For Ryan and Josh, it's both Calvin Ridley. The rookie to watch, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. Ryan put Javion Hawkins. Josh put Kyle Pitts. Joe's sleeper from this team, Cordell Patterson. He said maybe he'll take some snaps at running back. I don't effing know. Everyone sucks here, and I was going to put Mike Davis, but no, he's the downside. And then Joe's IDP sleeper, AJ Terrell. A rare corner that doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. And then Betz is player to watch for good or bad reason. Just a player to watch. Who do you got, Betz?
All right. You talked about him. Let's talk Mike, I don't skip leg day, Davis. It is officially #quad season on Twitter. Best shape of his life every year it comes around. But here we are. I don't know what to do with Mike Davis this year, guys. I'm going to be honest with you, because when you look at what he did last year, obviously with the Christian McCaffrey injury, he was thrust into fantasy football relevance and was awesome. Or was he, right? You think about what he did, and for a few weeks, I read a lot about DFS. I play DFS. That's kind of where my heart and my passion is right now. But there was weeks in a row where you're just play Mike Davis and move on to your next position. Don't think twice about it. He was cheap. He was affordable. He played well. It all lined up. And then when you think about it, his year kind of progressed in a way where it's all right, he actually had a lot of down weeks, RB 35, RB 30, RB 39, 32, 25, all in a row. And everyone is just assuming Mike Davis is actually now good at football again. I'm not saying he's not, but when you look at the historical trends of running backs, they don't break out at the age of 28. That's not how this game works. And so for me, I totally get the argument that listen, look at the depth chart. Who else is he going to compete with for targets? I totally understand. I also understand if Julio leaves, there's a lot of passing volume to go around to the running back position. So I get it. But to me, Mike Davis is one of the most obvious fades right now in best ball, given his ADP. And it's not because he's necessarily high in the running back ranks, but you just look at what you have to give up to get him on your roster. You're passing on stud wide receivers in the rounds 3, 4, and 5 to get him on your roster. And I just can't do it. So he's kind of an enigma this year. It seems like an obvious fade. based off the fact that, for 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row, no one cared about Mike Davis. And all of a sudden he had 7 good games last year, and all of a sudden he's the new thing. So he's my guy that I'm kind of fading early and just kind of seeing what the ADP does. I feel like by August, guys, he's going to be in the 3rd round consistently in redraft leagues. And if that's the case, I'm out.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head is what's going to happen if Julio leaves, because your good friend of the show, friend of mine, Kyle Borg, has always pointed out that vacated targets tend to favor running backs. But the system you expect Arthur Smith to run doesn't favor running backs in the passing game. So what's going to happen? And so it seems pretty, it's funny that we've only mentioned Julio as in a past tense on the team. So it's not even someone we're even considering there. So it's likely to happen. But how's it going to play out for Mike Davis? And you kind of brought up that there were weeks where it felt like he was this guy last year, but he really wasn't. And then there were his easily down weeks. So even if he gets the volume, are we sure he's ready to handle that? I have him as an upside strictly because of what you said, Betz. If those targets break his way, he could end up being a workhorse, almost a 300 touch back. It seems unlikely with his age and never having done it before, but we've also seen Raheem Mostert kind of break out in an old age. I'm not saying Mike Davis is that, but those quads, baby. So
you mentioned breakout in an old age, and you literally just put Raheem Mostert in that sentence. What happened last year?
Injury.
This is what happens with these types of players when they break out, quote unquote, later in their careers. They're done within 2 years. And I made an entire list of players going back all the way to 2014 to just show exactly this trend. And I'll start with Justin Forsett back in 2014. Remember him? He'd been on 4 different teams prior to that breakout with Baltimore. Had an RB8 finish in 2014. Guess how many more seasons he played and was never fantasy relevant again?
Probably 2.
Done.
Yeah.
That's it. Done. The next year, we go to 2015. Danny Woodhead was RB3 in PPR. Played a grand total of 10 games after that season. Done. Nada. Never to be heard from again. The very next year, LeGarrette Blount with the Patriots scores 18 touchdowns, finishes in the top 10, and plays for 2 more teams in the next 2 years and does nothing for fantasy relevancy. Mind you, Blount actually did have 1,000-yard season prior to that, his rookie year in Tampa Bay, but this was the spike, and that was it. Everybody was beating that bandwagon. Oh, yeah, he can easily be a 10-touchdown guy in 2017, et cetera, going to Philly. No, stop. Then the very next year, going into Alex Collins, again, another Baltimore guy. Played with Seattle a couple years, ended up missing 6 games the following year, and had only 18 carries since that season. That's it. Same year, CJ Anderson. Remember, everybody was banging that drum that he was finally going to break out. Goes for 1,007 yards, travels to 2 different teams, and has done absolutely nothing since. This is the trend that we're following with Mike Davis. I personally don't care that the Falcons brought in no competition for him. All that means is Matt Ryan's going to throw the football 750 times, and they're all going to Kyle Pitts. Let's be honest here. Because that's what everybody wants to see. I want nothing to do with Mike Davis. Just like Betz said, that ADP is only going to grow unless they bring in, I don't even want to say viable competition, because at this point, who the hell is still out there that can become viable competition? There is no one. They're going to bring back Le'Veon Bell. There you go, right?
The thing is, I actually think that's pretty feasible to happen, actually.
But yeah, Mike Davis, look, he has some upside this season, says he's going to see the volume. But the problem is I think the main reason he fell off, because he had a few good games. Like he had 4, he had some great games, was an RB1. He just fell off. And it's because teams started to recognize him as a really good back. Like he was performing well. Like he was a really good back. Teams started to team up on him because Teddy B could not throw the ball effectively to his receivers. And Mike Davis just crumbled. He just fell apart, and his last games as starters were not good games. And he was not trustworthy. It's going to be hard to load the box against Mike Davis when you have Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage back there in the receiving game, knowing that Matt Ryan is still the quarterback. It's going to be tough to do that. But I mean, Mike Davis just didn't perform with the loaded box. He just didn't perform. He just regressed. So with that high of a price, yeah, I'm probably out on Mike Davis as well. I just don't see that much upside for him going into.
The Falcons' offensive line is not great at all.
It's not great either. And their defense is still not
last
good.
year 3.9 yards per carry. Like, I understand that's a stat that, is just kind of like, frowned upon, so to speak, but it still, in a way, it does speak volumes. I mean, if you're not gaining yards per touch or carry or whatever it may be, no matter how many tackles you're breaking, at the end of the day, it's what production you're getting and yards per attempt. That's a metric that still matters in my book.
Yep. Yeah, I just like this team has a bad defense and they trust Matt Ryan to throw the ball 700 times, and they're going to do so. They have Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Russell Gage.
The Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts.
There you go.
I love it.
Celebrity couple. No, and that's the hard part, is projecting Atlanta like Tennessee, because they're just not that at all. That's not the team they are. So
no, they're not. Yeah, they're going to keep throwing. I just don't. Mike Davis is just too high priced. Looking at what we saw from him last season, 3rd round ADP, 4th round ADP is just you're passing up on some gold mine wide receivers in that spot. It's just not worth it.
And that's the thing too, looking at ADP this early in the offseason, like, it's going to be skewed. I mean, everybody kind of assumed that when Mike Davis landed there, they were going to draft a running back. So they were fading him in early drafts. Well, they didn't draft a running back. So now it's only a matter of time till that ADP slowly starts to rise. And again, it's like you're going to end up paying up for, what you hope is going to be the RB18 by end of the year. That's going to be the RB58.
Yeah, because he's going to – the problem is people just want to see the volume. That's what they want to see, because, like, there are not that many running backs that you could say are workhorses. Mike Davis is a good receiving back, and there's no one else there. There's no one else there. No one's going to take touches from him. So he's going to see a pretty big number of carries, a big number of touches, and people are going to be attracted to that. And I'm just not into it. I'd rather have a lot of other running backs, and where he's being drafted, I'd rather draft a bunch of other receivers in that range.
I want to pose one question here, because I know the elephant in the room really obviously is, when's Julio going to get traded? Where is he going to go, etc.
Yep.
Betz, I don't even want to say where do you think Julio is going to get traded, but with these so-called vacated targets, who do you realistically think is going to benefit from that? Is it going to be a rookie tight end in Kyle Pitts? Is it maybe going to be Hayden Hurst running those 2 tight end sets? Is Calvin Ridley going to literally shoot to the frickin' moon and 170 targets because they don't have anybody else to throw to? What's your thought process there?
The answer to your question is yes. When you have Julio Jones off the field, people are done with Julio, and look at the advanced metrics, 4th in yards per route run at the position last year. He's still Julio Jones, obviously tried to come back from the hamstring injury far too soon, as we see every year, aggravates it. The recovery the second time is longer. So he's still the same Julio Jones. And you look at the splits with Calvin Ridley with and without Julio Jones, he's a top 5 wide receiver every week. Don't even think twice about it. So I definitely think he benefits from getting those targets a little bit more. But you look at where's the fallout from there, right? Because that's not helping anyone. We all know Calvin Ridley is a stud in fantasy. To me, I really do think the sneaky appeal here, and this is kind of gross, is actually Hayden Hurst. And here's why I say that. And I'm not saying that he's going to be good. I'm not saying that he's going to be really reliable. But right now it's best ball season, and I'm doing a ton of drafts. He is literally going after players who might not make an NFL roster. Yeah. But you look at what Arthur Smith did last year in Tennessee. They're in a ton of 2 tight end sets. So I think he's a little bit of a sleeper this year. That's going to return value on where his ADP is. Again, don't hear what I'm not saying. He's not going to be a top 10 tight end, but just kind of looking at will he have a few spike weeks here or there?
Like what Ferkser did last year.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. So he's my super dark horse. And he's free. But from a more consistent standpoint, I think Calvin Ridley is going to, Russell Gage is going to be fine. 5 for 70 most weeks. That's going to get it done in PPR leagues for sure. So I think he's probably the primary beneficiary, but I do think Hayden Hurst is really sneaky late round dart throw in best ball leagues.
Love hearing you say Hayden Hurst, because that was exactly where my mind was going at that. Like, they're not going to throw to the running back position. They don't have the quality players there. And Arthur Smith just kind of allergic to throwing to running backs because, all those freaking nightmares with Derrick Henry trying to catch a football. So why not throw to somebody that you traded a second round draft pick for and just trot out 2 first round tight ends? I have no issue with it. And Hayden Hurst actually is a pretty good blocker. So if you split out if you split out Kyle Pitts, you keep Hayden Hurst in line. He's the guy that's basically going to be finding the zones and catching 8-9 yard passes all freaking game. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he just doesn't have the upside of a top 12-ish, top 10 tight end, but he's definitely a value in like a best ball league. He could have some nice weeks if he scores a touchdown. So yeah, in best ball, that'd be awesome. But I really like Russell Gage's upside in the last 4 or 5 games. I recently put out a tweet about it. He was the wide receiver 10 in PPR leagues. He scored only 3 touchdowns in 5 games. That's a lot of touchdowns. That would put him on a pace for double-digit touchdowns. But he was still getting a consistent amount of targets, and he was just a big part of this offense. So I think with Julio gone, that's Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst. Look, since they don't have a run game, they're going to have to throw so many times. And I think Russell Gage is going to be a good part of the offense. And in PPR, I think he could be a solid flex option pretty much every single week for you.
I don't love Gage. I think he's just a guy. PPR, you might be able to use him in some bye weeks, but I don't see it happening too much with him. So I agree. I think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, and I think there's going to be situations where they're going to run a lot of big sets, and you might see single wide receiver with Calvin Ridley. So
let's talk about the elephant in the room real quick, though. Like, how high is Kyle Pitts in your rankings? Like, 6. he's the hotness, right? Like, no one cares about Hayden Hurst except for us sickos. Like, where's Kyle Pitts in your ranks?
Tight end 6, quite a bit behind the Waller, Kelsey, Kittle thing, but bunched in with Hutchinson, Andrews, Fant.
All right, I got it.
So far I've only statted out the first 11 teams that we're talking about, and of those 11, I have Pitts at 4 behind Hawkinson, Goddard, and Fant. So I'm probably going to be lower on him than most.
Gotcha.
So I've got him for Goddard.
I've got him at 7 behind Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Hawkinson, Andrews, and I think I have him behind Gesicki. I really like Gesicki this year a lot. I think he's going to have a big breakout along with Tua Tagovailoa. I'm all in on Tua this year as well. So I like Gesicki a lot. So I have him right behind Gesicki, but that could flip and Pitts could be the tight end 6.
Yeah, that's where I've got him. I've got him at 6 as well. All right, cool. I just wanted to get your guys' temperature on him because I mean, man, the hype again is going to get out of control.
I mean, obviously, he's numero uno in Dynasty. We all know this, right?
Well, well, what I was going to say is it's going to be real interesting in like analyst drafts because we all kind of, and this is going to sound awful, but we all kind of understand that he's not going to be as good as everyone thinks he's going to be. When are you willing to draft Pitts is the biggest question. And I know whatever answers we give, none of us are going to get him, but that's what I'm most interested in is when are you willing to take that flyer? Betz, go ahead.
I feel like off the top of my head, the round that kind of sticks out to me is like 8 or 9, maybe. But it's also like when you look at the historical hit rates of tight ends taken.
I was literally about to bust your balls on that.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't matter. Like literally, it doesn't matter if you take tight ends there. The hit rate is so low that you're almost just wasting your draft pick. Yep. Now, of course, there's outliers and it happens year to year. But like you want the Kelseys, you want the Kittle, Darren Waller, or the random dude in the 12th round. Like that's kind of the range that you want. So
I just literally had an episode last week. I'm doing a series about, hit rates in rounds 1 through 12, and I've done little sections in each round. And literally like rounds 7 through 10 and 11, like rounds 7 through 12, basically we're at like the 10% hit rate range for tight ends.
Well, the Ballers did a great show on that last year where it's like rounds 5 through 12, it's less than 50% where they even finish as a tight end 1 or something. It's
and
Hitman
disgusting. Was still in on Higbee. I had to bust the ball off that last year. Just wait, that was coming again. Yeah,
but because what's funny for me, and again, as I prefaced, I know I'm never going to land him. If I don't land one of the big 3, I'm willing to maybe gamble on Andrews in the 5th, because that's sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not there. And sometimes I'm willing to pull that trigger. But if I don't land one of those 4 before the 5th, I won't look at tight end again until the 10th or 11th round. And Pitts is long gone before I'll make that consideration. So,
yeah, I feel that to a T. I mean, Ryan, we wrote like kind of opposite end arguments last year on tight end. Like, I'm all for going early on tight end, securing that cheat code at that position. And if not, either streaming it or just fading it all together and pray to God you can make a trade midseason. Like, that's just kind of my mentality with tight ends. Like, give me the solidified 15 points a week from Kelsey or Waller. Or it's even hard for me to throw Kittle into that conversation because he never seems to finish a season. Yeah. And Betz, I know you're the injury guy and you're going to tell me he's not injury prone, because again, I don't believe in it either, but there's a certain point where it's like, dude, stay on the field, man, because your best ability is availability. And
the 49ers health guys are not very good either. Everyone on that team got hurt. Everyone on that team was getting hurt. Jimmy G.
Betz, you need a new job.
Where do I play?
Yeah.
Like, their entire team was hurt at some point. Like, Jimmy G kept getting hurt with his knee. Deebo Samuel got hurt half his games. Kittle had a big injury with his ankle. Like, half their defense.
I say the running backs took turns.
Yeah, running backs. Yeah, all their running backs got hurt at least once. It was just Jeff.
That
Wilson
reminds me of the Eagles.
Jeff Wilson recently just went down. Like, it's hard for me to trust Kittle at his price, because he's going to be drafted as a top 3, top 4 tight end, depending on the hype on Pitts or Hawkinson or Andrews, whoever. But he's going to be drafted very high, and with those injury concerns with the 49ers health staff, it's just. I'd much rather have Waller or Kelsey. I'd rather have Hawkinson. I'm really high on Hawkinson this year as well. I have him ahead of Kittle in my rankings right now.
What we've seen Kittle do on the field.
That's a hot take.
Yeah, I'll take number 3. Yeah, I love him this season.
I'll take Kittle. I'll take Kittle. He's worth the risk if he's still sitting there in the 3rd round. I'm not willing to. I'm a guy who's willing to go Kelsey in the 1st round. 2nd round, I have to go running back. It's just especially if I want Kelsey, but even more so so I'm typically 2nd round running back every time. The 3rd round, if Waller or Kittle are there, it depends on how the rest of the draft is shaken out. I'll take a gamble on him.
All right, guys, that was good. That was a bunch of good discussions, but we're going to move on to the Bengals. Last year's record, 4-11-1. Not so new coach Zach Taylor. So I'm going to read through all these. Names again: upside, downside, trust fall, rookie to watch, and then Joe's guys at the bottom. And then we'll talk about Betts' player to watch. So upside, Ryan has Jamar Chase. Josh has Joe Mixon. Downside, both Ryan and Josh have Joe Burrow. Man, I do not like that at all. And then the trust fall, Ryan has Joe Mixon. So the trust fall, Ryan has Joe Mixon. Josh has T. Higgins. The rookie to watch, both Ryan and Josh have Jamar Chase. Joe's sleeper is Thaddeus Moss. His father is Randy Moss, and he has never dropped a pass Joe Burrow has thrown to him. Okay. And then Joe's IDP guy, Jesse Bates. Stop sleeping on him. He's a top 5 at his position in the league, and he is only 24. All right. So, Betts, your player to watch for good or bad reason, just a player to watch in fantasy football. Who is it?
Yeah, I feel like I could have gone any number of directions, and I had to come on the show and, of course, bring one of the injured guys for the Bengals, right? I had to talk about Joe Mixon or Joe Burrow, but I figured we'd talk about both of them anyway. So we can talk about whichever one first. But I guess the guy I'll talk about is Joe Mixon first here, because he's a player that last year gained some buzz, got up into like the break at the 1st round, 2nd round of ADP. Like, you had to take him there if you wanted him. Then he burned everyone, right? And then we had this whole saga of like, it's not that bad. His foot sprain will be back soon. 3 weeks later, he'll be back soon. 5 weeks later, 6 weeks later, all of a sudden it's Christmas. There's still no Joe Mixon on the field.
And then he got put on IR.
Finally, yes, so week 17. Thank you, Bengals.
Week 17 got put on.
So there's a lot of people out there that got burned by Joe Mixon last year. I want to come on the show and give a vote of confidence for his health Now, I'm not sure I'm going to invest him at his ADP. I don't know that I can really trust him just based off of kind of what we've seen. But as far as his health, like I do truly believe that the foot injury was a concern last year. You talk about these midfoot sprains. This is a really tricky injury to come back from in season. Like these guys are basically stressing the joints and the ligaments that are trying to heal literally every time they sprint. So if you have that going on, the only way to get it better is to truly rest it and let it recover. There were some pictures on social media of Joe Mixon's about like November where he was in a walking boot. That should have told us everything we needed to know. He was never going to play again that season. You look at kind of how that heals though over time. In players who have that midfoot sprain that are young, that are athletic, and that are high draft capital picks, so talking for running backs, second or first round, the data suggests that if they are able to avoid surgery, they actually do very well the following season, assuming that they have time off. Now, that doesn't really talk about their like performance on the field from a fantasy football standpoint. I'm talking the ability to play games. I'm kind of excited about Joe Mixon as far as that is concerned. If other people in my league are going to be like, you know what, I'm done with Joe Mixon. I'm never taking him again. He burned me so many times. What happened with Will Fuller last year, right? Like the same sort of thing. Like you just can't hold this vendetta with these guys year after year after year, or you will lose value. So I'm not saying Joe Mixon is a value. I'm not saying he's not, but I just think there's going to be some good football games ahead for where he's at. It's for me, it just kind of depends on where he settles in ADP, basically.
I'm right there with you. Like I don't.
ADP, go ahead.
No, you go. You got the data.
I was gonna say currently his ADP is like late second, early third. I don't think that's bad because I mean at this point we all know that every first round pick is either going to be a running back or Travis Kelce, right? Yep. Like I feel like even the best wide receivers aren't even going early right now because we know how scarce.
They fall in that 10 to 12, and they fell in the 10 to 12 range, and that's what started happening last year too. So,
so at that point, then it becomes the second round is all number one wide receivers. So then you're still getting RB 14 Joe Mixon at pick 20 to 24. I don't think that's a terrible range. I mean, I'll take that all day, especially if you're in the front of the draft where you're obviously going a stud running back. I'd feel more confident with Mixon as my 2 than I would as my 1. But again, it's personal preference at that point. It's how you build your roster overall because I get it. Like you don't trust him. You don't know really the quality of the Bengals offensive line. And did they really do enough to like help Mixon in the running game and help protect Burrow's other knee and current knee and any future knees he may have? Like, I don't know. And is he going to stay upright? Sure, maybe. I don't know. But he had one big game last year, and we've seen it kind of every year. It's like he has this one game that completely inflates his entire season. Oh, but his points per game were 14, blah, 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 this and that. It's like, no, it was 45 and then 9.5. Like, that's what it is. So the consistency there is, and you know, we'll have actually Bob Lung's going to be on with us, and I think it's what, next week or 2 weeks?
Next week.
2 weeks. No, 2 weeks, because we got Jeff coming on next week.
Yep.
Anyway, regardless, king of consistency rankings. That's what Bob Lung preaches, and I'm all about consistency myself. And when a guy is not giving you that consistency, it makes it harder to trust. So it would be, again, not the RB1, but I'll take him as my RB2 if I already have that RB1. The problem is where you're picking in a draft order, you may not be able to have that opportunity.
Well, you guys kind of hit it on the head for me. Especially for someone who does want to go tight end early, if I took Kelce in the first round and I'm able to grab Antonio Gibson or somebody like that in the second round and then bookend that with Joe Mixon in the third, it's all about expectations with Joe Mixon. And I know, Matt, you worked with Ball Blast forever. Michel Majouk was trying to tell everybody, this guy is not a top 10 running back. If you want to call him a top 15, top 20 running back, that's fine, but stop with this top 10 nonsense. And she was absolutely right. And that's where the expectation needs to come in. This is going to sound awful, but it's playing back to the whole volume with Mike Davis thing. He might get the volume, but that Bengals team is not all of a sudden going to be a 12-win team that's able to run the ball every time they want to. It's just not going to play out that way. So he is going to be high volume. He is going to be an RB2, but you got to treat him like an RB2. So if his ADP, like last year, starts creeping towards the first round, count me out on that. There's nowhere near where I want to draft Joe Mixon.
Yeah, there's no way I'm comfortable drafting him in the top half of the second round. Like if he starts sneaking into that range, back end of the second round, start of the third round, I'm going to take that all day. He has a lot of upside. He's going to get the volume. Look, this offensive line is not great, but it's definitely better than it was last season. And this offense is going to be very, very productive. Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. They have great weapons in the receiving game. And this offense is going to be productive. He's going to get a lot of opportunities to score. But it's just too concerning with the offensive line problems, with the fact that he's very inconsistent to draft him in the high-end second round. That's just no place you can really draft him.
And that's really why I have him as my upside, because I feel like where he's at is pretty comfortable. But again, like if he starts putting together that consistency, now you have a top 6 guy.
Yeah.
And for that price, I'm all for it.
It just remains to be seen what that offensive line is going to look like. So,
correct.
So yeah, where is, like, I know you said he like pick 20, pick 24. What what number running back is he off the board? Do you have
14?
14. Yeah, that's
so right now he's going. So you're 10 through 18. 10 is Austin Eckler. 11 is Cam Akers. 12 Antonio Gibson. DeAndre Swift at 13, Mixon at 14, Dobbins at 15, Josh Jacobs at 16, CEH at 17, and Miles Sanders at 18.
That seems about right.
That sounds
yeah.
Fair, yeah. It sounds about fair.
He just needs to stay where he is.
I mean, I honestly, like, I could see an argument for him really as high as 11.
Yeah, I can't.
I said an argument. I'm not saying I believe it, but I'm saying you could make that argument. I mean, Akers
Yeah.
really isn't proven. We've seen the rushing upside with Antonio Gibson, but we really haven't seen the passing upside yet.
Mhm.
With Swift, now they want to bring in 80 other running backs to compete with him. Do they trust him enough to give him enough work to be that? We know the volume is going to be there with Mixon. At the end of the day, it boils down to how efficient is he going to be with it.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter how efficient he really is, as long as he's pretty healthy for most of the season. With the volume he's going to get, he's going to be an RB2.
Famous last words right there.
Yeah, I know that's a big if, but if he's healthy, he will be an RB2 with the volume he's going to get. That's just how the running back position works. If you see that much volume, you're going to be an RB2 pretty much locked in. It doesn't really matter how inefficient or efficient you are. He's just going to be a locked-in RB2. And RB14, with his upside to finish inside the top 8, top 10 running backs, that's totally cool with me as an RB2.
Because some running backs are getting hurt.
Yeah.
We just don't know which ones yet. So
I think the big thing for Mixon is he's never been the real primary pass catcher. And with Gio gone, this is a team that does target the running back. And I mean, who's the pass catcher behind him? Travion Williams, maybe. It's remains to be seen, to where it seems like they really want to use Samaje Perine, and he would be obviously the big back, thus giving Mixon possibly more cracks at the pass catching role. So,
yeah.
All right, the elephant in the room, Joe Burrow.
Oh no!
Ryan and I both have him as a downside.
Matthew,
you have to be with me on this one.
You're in on Joe Burrow?
Yeah. Please.
I love Joe Burrow.
I'm not saying I don't love him.
Right.
I need to be clear on that. I do like Joe Burrow.
Yes. Okay. I'm with you on that. We got to cool it. Just like telling someone that they're going to be ready for week 1 on June 1st or May 31st or whenever that report came out, you just can't do it. I mean, you're looking at a player coming off of a significant knee injury where he had the ACL, he had the MCL, he had, quote, additional damage inside the knee joint. Basically, that means one of two things, most likely: meniscus and or cartilage injury. Both of those things slow the rehab and slow the recovery. You just can't do the things you normally would do if it was a clean, you hear that term, clean ACL tear, that you would for another player. It's just different. Now, all that being said, I do think he is ready for week 1. I think he plays in week 1. What does that mean? Is he the same Joe Burrow that we saw dropping back literally at the highest rate in the entire NFL before his injury last year? Yeah. I don't know. I doubt it.
Times per game, I think.
The most dropbacks in the NFL before the injury. I don't know. I don't think it is. Now, all that said, Joe Burrow is a super athletic guy. He's a rushing quarterback. He doesn't seem like it, but he can run the football and he can make plays. I don't think we're going to see that Joe Burrow in the first month to 6 weeks of the season. So it's all about what you're expecting from him as a fantasy asset, right? If you're saying, Betz, I get those things, but look at those weapons. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, Joe Burrow has fantastic weapons to throw the football to, including Joe Mixon out of the backfield, bringing in his college teammate to add to T. Higgins, who I think is a stud. I also think Tyler Boyd is so underrated. Like, this offense could be really good if things go right. But I just think right now, like, people are hearing the report and they're like, he's fine. No, he's not. Not yet, anyway. I do think we see Joe Burrow get back to form at some point this year. But last time I looked, like, I use underdog ADP because it's pretty sharp. Obviously, people are paying for that. He was going as the quarterback 9 off the board. Yeah. I am not doing that. Like, if he was like 13, 14, 15, sure, sign me up. I can't take him at quarterback 9.
And that's exactly why I have him as the downside. It's just where he's going to go based on first overall pick, name recognition, and weapons. I like Joe Burrow. I have him as a 4,300-yard quarterback. I don't know where his passing touchdowns will be. I have it at about 23 right now. Those are good numbers, but in fantasy, they're not going to be QB1 numbers. In a 2 QB league, I would love to have Joe Burrow, but in a single QB, his ADP does not play right for me for a guy who I'm trying to, I like everybody, I'm a QB late kind of guy. Burrow's going to be one of those mid-round guys where the juice isn't worth the squeeze for me.
Yeah, I'm right now, my projections have Burrow over 4,600 passing yards. And a lot of that too is the inflated 17-game schedule. But for me, like, if I'm looking at a quarterback and I know I'm going to get 400 rushing yards from him, that's like a cheat code for a top 10 guy. And I know that Burrow's athletic enough to get that, but I don't know that he's going to get that, because I feel like most quarterbacks that rush for 400 plus yards do it because they need to do it. Burrow's going to throw enough that he's not going to need to do it. So for him to make up that difference, he's going to have to throw 30 plus touchdowns or accumulate 30 plus touchdowns, whether that's on the ground contributing with that. And he's going to have to throw for probably 4,700 yards to make up the difference. So again, 17-game schedule, you're going to have a lot of numbers that are inflated across the board for quarterbacks. So is that going to be the case with Burrow? He's got the talent around him. He could easily throw for 35 touchdowns. That defense isn't great still. And he's throwing, like we said, at the highest rate last year before the injury. And hell, he's throwing 60 yards right now with a knee brace on. So why the hell can't he do it, right? Because, you know, we all throw with our knees apparently. So
well said.
That's just too high of a damn price for me. It's just too high. If he's falling to the 11th, 10th, 12th round, like, sure, I might take that. I'll roll that dice. But again, it really just depends on the types of leagues that we're in. I mean, if we're drafting with a bunch of other fantasy analysts, then yeah, Burrow's probably going to be there in the 12th round. But in your everyday home league redraft, when he's probably going in the 8th round because everybody wants to fill out their starting spots before their bench spots, I'm out on that price.
Yeah, I think QB9 is probably the max I'm going to go. I think I have him at QB7 or QB8 right now. I really, really like him this season. Look, this defense sucks. They're going to have to throw. And especially, look, Joe Mixon has had a lot of health problems lately, as we just talked about. If he goes down, like, they're just going to depend on Joe Burrow even more to just carry this offense. I mean, I'm not going to bet on it, but it could happen, and that could lead to a much pass-happier offense. And he just had a lot of flashes last year. He had a couple bad games. He had the injury, but I'm just in on the first round pick. I'm in on him with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd with a bad defense. They're just going to throw, and he's going to have tons of weapons that are able to make plays, catch the ball, run after the catch. I just think he's going to explode. But QB9 is probably the highest price. I think the cautionary tales for Joe Burrow, and this isn't a one-to-one comparison like with injury or anything like that, but the cautionary tale for fantasy are Ben Roethlisberger and Teddy Bridgewater, who both had 3 wide receivers in the top 25 last year, but neither were top 15 fantasy quarterbacks. They can support the weapons, but they just can't stand up to the rest of their competition.
That's a great call. I think that makes a ton of sense.
I think we can agree, though, that Joe Burrow is much more talented than either of those guys.
You are not wrong, Hutch.
Yes, correct.
I think we can agree a little on that. But
yeah,
Yeah, I just really like him this year with the weapons, with the pass happiness of the offense. But QB9 is definitely a high price. I honestly only think it's going to go up from here.
That's my concern with you start getting the camp hype.
Reports.
Yep.
Like more reports, he's going to be great for week 1. Knee braces off. He's going to be good for week 1. Like when we get to August, like we keep seeing those type of reports. Like he's just going to blow through the roof. He could be drafted as like a top 6 quarterback by the time we're in September, and that's just a price.
And this is why I encourage everyone to please follow Matthew Betz, because one thing Betz does great whenever there's injury breaking news is he gives you both sides of the coin and gives you a realistic thing of what this might actually mean. And you've already touched on it on this show, Betz, that all the reports for Burrow, everyone needs to pump the brakes a little bit, and he'll calm you down during camp hype too. So thank you, Betz.
Usually the bearer of bad news. Sometimes I have good news with Joe Mixon, But real quick, like a good word of advice for your listeners and viewers is like, you see the headlines, but no one actually follows what happens. In that same article, they talked about how they didn't want any running backs behind him when he dropped back to pass out of fear of them bumping into him. Like that he's not ready yet. Clearly he's not ready yet. So just read the articles, read everything, because you need to consume information rather than going off of retweets and everything online.
No, I didn't even know that. That's freaking hilarious.
Yes. Yeah, if you watch the videos,
there should have been a whole separate article where that's the headline. That's hilarious.
I'll write an article about it.
All right.
I'll read
no RBs in backfield.
That sounds like something that like BuzzFeed would put out as a headline. Like I can see that already.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
Or the Onion, something like that.
Anything else we want to talk about with like these receivers, like with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, or
they're all?
I would much rather have Higgins than Chase. That's me. Like I have Higgins as my trust fall. I think the rapport that they built last year is helpful. Like Chase sat out all of last year. I think he's going to have a little bit of rust that he needs to knock off. Like we see it all the time with injuries too. Like when guys come back from injuries, they're healthy and ready to play. But playing in games is so different than playing in practice or exercising in your home gym or on some field at IMG or something. Like
all I'm hearing you say right now is another connection that Burrow and Chase are going to have, because they're going through this together, man.
Good God.
No, I have Higgins.
One's coming back from injury, one's coming off the couch. They're two different things.
I have Higgins 2 spots, I think, ahead of Chase. I'll take whoever's cheaper.
Yeah, I think Chase might be the highest drafted based on just the hype around Chase. I think Chase could be drafted in like the top 6 rounds by the time we get to September with his hype. I'm not drafting. Jamar Chase would probably be the second receiver off the board in my order. I'd probably draft Higgins, then Chase, then Boyd. Chase mostly just for the upside, but Boyd is probably.
I think Higgins is going to have more touchdowns personally.
So do I.
Who? Chase over Boyd? More touchdowns?
No, Higgins over all of them. I mean, the guy's wingspan is like the freaking Eiffel Tower. Like catches everything. It's just that's what he does. So.
What about,
I love Chase, and I think he has that upside eventually, but it's not going to be in year 1, in my opinion.
Before we move on,
I think you could have a Justin Jefferson type of breakout this season. I think it's possible. I think it's possible with coming back with Joe Burrow and the offense is going to be productive. I think it's definitely possible, but there's no chance I'm going to bet on it or think that's going to happen or predict that's going to happen.
What are we going to say, Betz?
I was going to say before we move on, without skipping a beat, everyone always goes to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. How about the wide receiver 13 before Joe Burrow's injury last year? No one wants Tyler Boyd. No one wants Tyler Boyd, who I think is actually #good at football. He's still just 26 years old. Like everyone is done with Tyler Boyd. He was a wide receiver 2, almost wide receiver 1 with Joe Burrow last year. Now I know the competition with like AJ Green was meh, and Jamar Chase is clearly more talented at this stage of their careers than AJ Green. But looking at kind of like his reliability, Joe Burrow, we talked about it all with Justin Jefferson as a rookie coming out. Like he was targeted in the slot. Joe Burrow loves the slot. Who plays in the slot? It's Tyler Boyd. He's gonna outperform his ADP no matter where he goes for the most part, because he's not going to climb into like round 5. He's not probably going to get to 6. If you're taking Tyler Boyd as your wide receiver 3 in like round 7, 8, 9, sign me up. Yep. I'm in.
Tyler Boyd was 13th in percentage of routes run from the slot in the NFL last year. Like this is what he does. He's predominantly a slot guy. I think the biggest knock with Boyd is he doesn't have the touchdown upside that a lot of these guys have. But we talked about Mixon not being able, maybe not handling a full-time like pass catching down back. Well, if they're looking for somebody over the middle on those short to intermediate routes, who's that going to be? That's Boyd.
That's Boyd.
So maybe Mixon still only has 50 targets, but then Boyd picks up the additional on top of what he would typically have. He's going to have over 100 targets, just like Chase and Higgins.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He could pass 100 targets.
Exactly.
Outside of those top three, like
they don't have anybody else.
They don't have.
If all three of those guys play 15 plus games this year, they're all going to have over 100 targets.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think they're going to be a great team to watch.
Yeah, they're going to be
for
very
fantasy.
Fantasy.
Let's preface that for fantasy.
Yeah,
for fantasy, they're not going to be. They're probably going to have like the same ish record, but that offense is going to be very, very productive. It's going to be very fun to watch. All right, guys, I think we're going to move on to Philly. We
have three Eagles fans on this podcast, and another one who used to watch them all the time. So this is going to be fun.
Who named this kid after Donovan McNabb? So.
All right, so Eagles last year record 4-11-1. New coach Nick Sirianni. All right, so upside players for Ryan and Josh. Ryan has Jalen Hurts. Josh has Devonta Smith. The downside players, Ryan has Dallas Goedert. Josh has Jalen Hurts. The trust fall player, both Ryan and Josh has Miles Sanders. And then the rookie to watch, Ryan has Devonta Smith. Josh has Kenny Gainwell. Joe's sleeper is Jalen Reagor, which I actually like a lot, Joe, if you're listening. He said, let me preface this by saying he's garbage. But his second option in the passing game, he's going to be taking at wide receiver 77. Dwayne Eskridge is being taken over.
Wow. I did not know that.
15 spots higher, and he is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett ahead of him.
That's crazy.
Remember when Reagor was everybody's dynasty wide receiver 3 last year? My, how the mighty have fallen.
Oh,
what a time to be alive.
Yeah.
Right?
And Jalen Reagor, he has the potential to do what Corey Davis did last year when he was the center of attention. That's what Joe said. That's definitely possible.
Yeah, that's been Joe's big thing is that Rager's just not a 1, and he could be much better as a 2. So
yeah, Rager's definitely.
Aside from not being good at football, we have to make sure that we get that dig in because
garbage.
Yeah. All right, so Joe's IDP, Alex Singleton, underrated player who doesn't do anything flashy but will consistently play great football. All right, so then we got Betts' player to watch for good or bad reasons. You have 2 players on here, but who are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about both?
I'm sure we're going to get to both.
I'm so confused with this team who, just a couple of years ago, I was just happy as could be watching them win the Super Bowl. And now I'm just like, what is this team? I have no idea. Kyle and I have talked about this. Yeah, Kyle and I have talked about this on the DFS show. Like when we were looking at win totals, he's in on the under. I don't hate it. They're actually my dark horse team to have the first overall pick in the draft. It's not likely. It's a dark horse.
Wow.
Things could fall apart pretty quickly because there's such a thin roster and the veterans
I think my
there.
soul
If they
just
don't
left my body hearing that.
Yeah, you just got to let it go for this year, man. Next year's our year. If
I'm not expecting a bad season, but that doesn't mean I want to realize it.
Say next year's our year. That's the Browns fans' motto.
Yeah, there you go. One of these years, we're winning the Super Bowl. We actually did. No, like the veterans on the roster, the line is getting older. Their studs on the defensive line are older. Like if anything happens to those guys, as we saw last year, it's over. So I don't really have a strong take on this team, to be honest with you guys. I think Miles Sanders' ADP last year was ludicrous. I think his ADP this year is interesting. The player that I'm going to bring up here, though, to watch for, is just Jalen Hurts. Like people are just kind of assuming that he is what we saw last year. And I just want to caution people, football is a small sample size game, even on like a 2-year basis. Like we're talking 16 games to 32 games. And trying to project anything beyond that is just so hard to do. We get it wrong all the time, right? If you're 50% in this, you're good.
Yep.
Now we're trying to project basically 4 games from last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And for me, the reason I want to bring him up as like a just pump the brakes kind of player is because last year, these rookies come in, there's no tape on these guys, comes in out of nowhere, lights up Green Bay. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, the Eagles good again. Newsflash, no, they're not. And now we're at a point where we're like, oh, he's awesome. He's going to be a top 5 upside quarterback. I'm not saying he can't, because I know what rushing does to the quarterback position, which I think we all agree on. So the ceiling is there for sure. But like, what happens if all of a sudden new coaching system, things are, the line is healthier, so they don't design runs for him. Like, they try to make him sit in the pocket. I don't know what this team is going to do. He's an ADP type of player for me. If he kind of falls to like quarterback 10, 11, 12, for sure, yes, give me the upside. If he starts to creep into like quarterback 7, quarterback 6, no, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's going to be about where he's drafted in September or August. I think he's going to creep up to that range just because of the rushing upside. I have him right around QB 10 right now. I just don't love it. And because a lot of people right now, I mean, I like Devonta Smith, but some people right now are just assuming Devonta Smith becomes great this year, and he's a rookie receiver, and rookie receivers don't often do that. And then outside of that, it's Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, and who we just discussed, Jalen Reagor is not a number 1. Dallas Goedert, I don't think he's a number 1. Like, they don't have anybody outside those 3 guys they don't have anybody outside of Devonta Smith that could be a number 1. So if Devonta Smith doesn't have a crazy good season his rookie year, like, they're not going to have a number 1 they're not going to have a clear cut number 1 in this offense. And it's definitely very concerning for Jalen Hurts' value and just this Eagles team.
Oh, most of what you said I agree with, until I don't think his ADP rises. I don't think your common draft respects the rushing quarterback the way the people who study fantasy football does. And my flag raising for this is Josh Allen last year. Josh Allen had proven his rushing capabilities and was still going off the board as QB 11. Obviously, nobody saw what was coming with Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts is not going to do that. But what I'm getting at is his rushing ability was not respected in drafts last year. And so I think as you get more and more people, they're going to want 4,000-yard passing quarterbacks, which Hurts is likely not to be. But my favorite thing when I was coming up with this is I think Hurts is an 800 rushing yard quarterback. 800 rushing yards is worth 2,000 passing yards in fantasy football. The rushing yards are just infinitely more valuable. And so that's what I want. And if I can get him, and Betz, you happen to hit his ADP on the head. I don't know if you were looking at it. He is QB 10 right now. If that's where he's staying, and QB 10 in most drafts is probably going in the 7th through 9th round, that's exactly when I start looking quarterback, because I filled my running backs, I filled my wide receivers. Now it's okay to look at quarterback. And Hurts is about the last guy where I'm willing to take there versus waiting 4 more rounds and grabbing whoever's left. I just think with that rushing upside, I feel like he's team falling apart proof as long as he doesn't get hurt. If they're good, he should be good. If they're bad, he's going to be running for his life, which sucks for Jalen Hurts, but it is great for fantasy managers.
This is my biggest issue.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
This is my biggest issue looking at Hurts, and really it's just the entire Eagles team as a whole, right? Like, we talk about how the Eagles traded back up. They drafted Devonta Smith. They got Hurts a weapon, right? So now everybody's like, oh, Philly's invested in Hurts. They're going to make him the guy, etc. They have 3 first-round picks next year. If anybody really thinks Hurts is their future, they're so dumb and don't understand football. Like, they have 3 first-round picks this year to protect themselves in the event that Hurts sucks this year. And that's my issue when I'm looking at Hurts, because I understand all of that. And there's so many different articles that have been written this offseason about the upside of Jalen Hurts. And if you want one, just go to Ball Blast Football. Victoria, our friend of the show, has got one on there where she thinks Hurts is going to be a top 5 quarterback. They just released one today. I can't remember who wrote it, but was talking about Hurts isn't going to be a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah,
so like there's exactly. And it's just, he has this like range of outcomes that to me, nobody else in fantasy football right now has. You could be talking about a guy that could be a top 5 quarterback, but you could be talking about a guy that's benched by week 6 or week 7. Have you seen the Philadelphia Eagles early season schedule? It sucks. And it is not easy at all.
Sad times.
Like they talk about we have the easiest schedule in the league this year. It's all after week 7. Like that's when all the easy games are. So if he gets off to a rocky start, a new coaching staff could be like, you know what? Let's throw in the veteran. Let's throw in Flacco. Maybe he gets 3 good games in a row, and then, they'll do a yo-yo act. And now you've spent an early round pick on the upside of a quarterback who has a huge question mark over his head anyway. And he ends up on waivers, but then maybe turns into a league winner. So it's like, for me, I'm not going to pay the price for someone like Jalen Hurts because there's so many unknowns. Right now, he's the biggest fantasy enigma for me, and I'm staying away from it in terms of redraft.
Yeah. Just credit where it's due. It's one of their new writers, Brandon Shoemaker over at Ball Blast. It was a very good article. I read it this morning where it just kind of tells you, basically, it expands on what Josh just said, how things could fall apart.
That's what his name was. Thank you.
And I want to go back to like Josh's point real quick. He said the Eagles have 3 first rounders this year, right? And Jalen Hurts could not be their future. And I know this is usually a redraft podcast, but this is why you need to sell Jalen Hurts in Dynasty for as high as you can. Because if he struggles at all this season, because this isn't going to be a bad team. Period. They're going to be a below average team. They're going to have a high pick somewhere. And if Jalen Hurts does not perform to what they want, or if he gets benched sometime in the season, they're going to draft a quarterback, and you could sell him for a pretty high price in Dynasty right now. There are guys that are in love with Jalen Hurts. There are like people last week just wrote him as a top 5 quarterback. Like, there are people who love Jalen Hurts right now that you could sell him for a very, very high price in Dynasty. He's going as almost a top 10 quarterback in Dynasty leagues, in Dynasty ADP. It's crazy right now.
That's a hard pass for me on that price.
It's a hard pass because if he has a mediocre or even like okay season, there's a solid chance they draft a quarterback. There's just a good chance they draft a quarterback, and it's
hell. They already had a good quarterback and then ruined him by spending a 2nd round pick on a quarterback. Like,
yeah, they did.
This is just what the Eagles do, apparently.
We have 4 hours to discuss that whole thing.
They want to be a quarterback factory. Just keep bringing in quarterbacks and then throwing them out.
Gosh.
Betz, we'll do a spin-off podcast bitching about the Eagles. How about that?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
That was a rough situation.
Let's go.
Block a full Saturday afternoon for it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. All right. So
Fun times.
we're gonna move on. So honestly, it kind of makes sense, but the trust fall of Miles Sanders. Do you guys actually trust him that much, or is he the only guy that you could sell?
I trust him based on where he's being drafted.
Yeah, I was going to say, Betz, I almost want to let Betz kick this off because Betz, the first thing you said was his ADP this year is interesting because I agree. Yeah. It was overblown completely last year. So tell us about it.
Yeah, you were drafting him at his upside last year.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I mentioned like the offensive line is healthy this season right now, but we've obviously seen a ton of struggles for like Brandon Brooks with Achilles injuries on both sides, significant shoulder dislocation. Talking about Lane Johnson, he's getting older. I almost said Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce, obviously been around the league for forever. Like, these guys are great players, but it's just that their time is coming to an end. So if they can be healthy this year and good, like, I think the offense that could actually surprise us a little bit. And clearly, banking on what happened with Miles Sanders last year and trying to project it forward now, if anyone is using that data to be like, well, look, like that's who he is, it's just wrong. Like, the offensive line was the worst in football last year because of how many injuries they had. So there's some risk built in. Yeah, exactly. They're playing backups. There's risk built in for sure with the team. But if the line can stay healthy, Miles Sanders is going basically at his floor. So, like, I kind of like Miles Sanders in terms of where you're getting him, where he's going in drafts. I still think he does have some upside. And you know what? Like, to be honest with you, if he doesn't have a great year and you take him in round 4 or 5, your team's still going to be okay. Like, you can replenish with the waiver wire, right? So, yeah, I'm intrigued by Miles Sanders' ADP. Again, last year was just crazy, but it's one of those situations where in fantasy, like, if you just take a stance on what happened last year is what's going to happen this year, you'll miss on a ton of guys. And obviously, people spent a first-round top 10 pick on Miles Sanders last year, which was crazy.
Yep.
But where he's at now,
I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I bought into the hype. But where's that now? Running back, what did you say? It was 18?
18, yeah.
Totally fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, even with how bad that offensive line was last year, he still averaged over 5 yards a carry. Like, that's what kind of talent he is. Like, everybody wants to talk about, he's not good as a receiver. His rookie year, he had over 50 catches and averaged 10 yards per reception. That doesn't happen very often at all in the NFL.
Last games. It's basically all in that like 8-game stretch where he was the workhorse for those last games.
And he's just such he's a touchdown waiting to happen when he touches the ball too. That's the big thing.
Exactly. And I mean, you can argue that he's not durable, which, all right, fine, whatever. Like, I mean, he's built like kind of the everyday running back now. He's 5'10", 5'11", 215, 216. Like that's Jamal Charles size, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Jamal Charles held up okay after a couple early injuries. I mean,
I know it's been the theme of the show today, but the thing I like about him is volume, and it's trash behind him. I know Gainwell could end up being something, but so could JVN Hawkins. But it's literally the same reason we've talked up Mixon and Mike Davis to a lesser extent, is that Jordan Howard, Kerryon Johnson, Boston Scott, they're not taking snaps away from Miles Sanders. The only thing that's going to take snaps away from Miles Sanders is Miles Sanders. He just needs to go out there and do his thing, and he's going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah, they've talked about in the offseason about, bringing on, working the screen game more into the offense.
Saw that.
Miles Sanders knows how to do that. Yeah, he had some issues with drops last year, but, I mean, let's be real. Carson Wentz couldn't hit the broadside of a barn standing 3 feet from it. Like, it wasn't happening last year. And that gets into players' heads. I mean, we saw just the Eagles spending a second-round pick on a quarterback got into Carson Wentz's head. The offensive line fell apart. It got into Carson Wentz's head. Like, sports psychology is a real thing, and people don't want to understand that. That type of thing probably worked on Miles Sanders as well. And now you bring in, I don't even want to say competition, because I'm fully of the thought process that Jordan Howard's not making this team. Like, they just need a camp body, and he's a familiar face. Like, I would probably say Kerryon Johnson makes that team over Jordan Howard. But Kenny Gainwell, 5th-round pick, the draft capital's not there. But what's one thing that he does really well? He works in the screen game.
Yeah.
So if you're going to tell me that they're going to throw the football 120 times to running backs, I'm okay with that, because Miles Sanders is getting at least 50 of those targets.
Much.
And I'll take it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is concerning that they keep signing running backs. Like, they keep bringing guys in, but they're not really bringing anybody that's concerning for Miles Sanders.
Exactly.
So where you're drafting him at RB18, I mean, with the volume he's going to see in the receiving game and in the running game. Because, look, Jalen Hurts is not like a 4,500-yard passer. Like, they're not going to pass for crazy numbers. Like, they're not going to, lean on Jalen Hurts. They're going to lean more on this run game. And Miles Sanders is going to see some big volume. And drafting him RB18 is basically his floor. Like, he's not really going to finish.
It's the opposite of last year.
With the O-line being good for now, if it stays healthy, which is a pretty big if for looking at over the last few seasons. But if it does, he could be a top 10, top 12 running back this season, but you're drafting him RB18. It's a great value.
And let's be real here. We all know the type of maximum upside running backs have with running quarterbacks. Why do you think everybody loves J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah.
Because of Lamar Jackson. That opens up so many running lanes for people.
It does.
It's just because defenses have to account for a running back that can put up 1,000 yards in a season.
Yep, absolutely. Any other guys you really want to talk about here? Or you want to start wrapping it up?
I'm not the Eagles fan, so I'll let them know.
I've said my piece. But again, like that said, we could talk 4 more hours on this. So it's probably a good idea to wrap it up.
4 more hours. We totally could.
Yeah. No, I think it's a team largely to fade outside of those 2 guys that we talked about a lot. I think, there's not going to be, like you said, enough passing volume to support all these guys. It's not going to be all of Jalen Reagor and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert. Like, they're not all going to get there. But I think we can say that collectively we're pretty excited about the upside of the rushing attack because of the offensive line and because of the rushing quarterback. So that's where I want to invest if I'm going on the Eagles, but I might save myself the pain this year and just kind of watch from
I don't have a single Eagles player with over 100 targets in my projections.
I think I have Smith over, but it's going back to kind of what you guys said, where they might just not be a very good team. We just dropped our NFC East preview over on Football Guys, and I had them as a 5-12 team. I don't see it this year. So
yeah, no, they're not.
Smash the under win total, right?
Let's go.
Top 5 NFL draft pick. Let's bring it. Come on, Philly.
Oh man.
Hopefully it's all on defense, because Hurts did great.
We need defense, that's for sure. We need a freaking corner. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Jesus.
All right,
okay.
let's get this thing going.
Let's do it. Let's wrap her up.
That's going to be all for this show. Big thanks for Matthew Betz for joining us.
Yes.
Betz, remind everyone where they can find you on Twitter. And what have you been working on lately that you want people to know about?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it, guys. Always a blast. Hopefully we can do it again soon. You all can follow me on Twitter at TheFantasyPT. And what's going on right now is the Ultimate Draft Kit. Holy crap. Putting in a lot of work behind the scenes on that, writing up all my injury content in the draft kit. You can also find my and Kyle's rankings for best ball if you purchase the UDK Plus in the DFS Pass. And right now, like, I'm kind of enjoying this little lull that kind of happens after the UDK for like 2 days. But then once you start getting towards like mid-June, end of June, towards August, we're going to be putting out a lot of content for DFS Pass subscribers in regards to like DFS strategy, best ball strategy. So if you're serious about kind of taking your game to the next level, that's where you can find me. And of course, on the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast.
Love it.
Awesome, man.
Appreciate you so much, Betz.
We really did.
Yeah.
You killed
Appreciate
it.
you guys.
All right, Hutch, bring us home.
All right. If you haven't subscribed to the Club Fantasy YouTube channel, get on it, youtube.com/Club Fantasy FFL. Follow Club Fantasy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL is clubfantasyffl.com for the website. The site is filled with our Look Inside articles, and I'm actually working on one that's coming out later in July. I'm going to keep the team a secret for now. The Jaguars, Jets, Texans, Falcons, Bengals are already up. The Eagles will drop on Friday. And one more time, guys, make sure you follow our awesome guest, Matthew Betz, on Twitter at TheFantasyPT. And be sure to join us next week. Even though Joe is back, I'll be on the other side of the stream. Joe is finally back, guys. Joe is finally back. I'll be on the other side of the stream. I unfortunately won't be on next week to join these guys. But our Look Inside series will continue as they look at the Lions, the Panthers, and the Broncos with the co-creator of the Carolina Fandom podcast and senior writer with Football Guys, Jeff Hazley. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy. I forgot to say that last week.
Oh, there you go.
See you all next week with Jeff Hazley from Football Guys.
Be sure to follow Hutch at TYFMNFL. Thank you so much, Hutch, for joining us this week.
Yeah, thank you.
See you guys next week, guys.
Last 2 weeks, guys.